Elias Moran, a weary rancher, stood alone in his dimly lit cabin as a storm rolled over the plains. The wind howled against the warped shutters, rain lashed sideways against the windows, and the thunder shook the beams of the old house, as if the heavens themselves wanted it torn down. His only company was the low crackle of firewood in the hearth, and the ache in his chest that had never truly gone away since the day he buried his wife on the hill overlooking the creek. Lightning flashed white across the valley, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw a rider at the gate, a lone silhouette, still and silent like a ghost. He told himself it was the storm playing tricks, but then it came. The heavy, sudden pounding on the oak door, so loud it made the hound under the table whimper and tuck itself tight against the floorboards. Elias reached for the shotgun that leaned against the wall, his hand trembling not from age, but from the feeling that whatever waited on the other side wasn't ordinary trouble. The pounding came again, faster, as if whoever stood there was desperate or dying. He yanked open the door. Rain and wind poured in with a boy no older than 16. His hat was dripping, his shirt plastered to his skin. The boy thrust a soaked envelope into Elias's hand without a word at first, as if just touching it had burdened him. "Who sent you?" Elias growled over the wind. "Don't know his name, sir," the boy stammered. "He gave me gold. Told me midnight, not a minute sooner, not a minute later. Said you'd understand." Elias ripped the seal. The firelight revealed 4 short words, scrawled in a shaking hand. "Don't take it off. Just do it, nothing more. No signature, no explanation." The ink bled where the paper had gotten wet, but the meaning stayed sharp, unsettling. His lips tightened. "What in God's name?" The boy stepped back, as if he wanted no part of whatever curse those words carried. "That's all I know. He made me swear I'd deliver it even if it killed me to get here." The boy's voice cracked, fear swimming in his eyes. Elias studied him. Mud-caked boots, saddle sores fresh, skin pale from riding through storm and darkness. The boy wasn't lying. "Whoever sent this had gone to lengths." "Midnight," Elias repeated under his breath. He glanced at the clock above the hearth, its hands pointing just past 12. His stomach knotted. Someone wanted him to move tonight. The boy's eyes flicked to the shotgun in Elias's grip. He swallowed hard, then backed into the rain. "I best be gone. He paid me for the ride, not the aftermath." With that, he disappeared into the black storm, swallowed by rain and shadow. Elias shut the door, leaned against it, and let the weight of the message sink into him. "Don't take it off. Just do it." Take what off? His badge, still tucked in a drawer since the day he quit the fight? The wedding ring he never stopped wearing? Or maybe his restraint, the last thread that kept him from spilling more blood than he already had? The storm pressed heavy on the walls. The fire hissed. The hound whimpered again. Elias paced the room with the letter crushed in his fist, jaw tight, breath heavy. The words had the taste of a command. Then another knock. Not hurried, not desperate, heavy, deliberate, the kind of knock that belonged to a man certain of his right to enter. The kind of knock Elias hadn't heard in years. The hound growled low, ears flat. Elias froze, shotgun raised, heart slamming in his chest. From beyond the door came a voice, rough, edged with a sneer he'd never forgotten. "Open up, Dyer. We got business." The fire popped. Elias's finger tightened on the trigger. The storm outside raged harder, as if the land itself knew. Whatever came next would change everything. The fire snapped in the hearth, throwing long shadows against the cabin walls. Samuel Dyer stood rigid, the shotgun still balanced in his hands, though he knew now it would do him little good. The man seated across from him wasn't some stranger blown in by the storm. He was someone Samuel once knew better than a brother, and wished he never had. Elias Vance leaned back in the chair as if he owned it, dripping rain from his coat, his boots leaving mud streaks on the floorboards. His hat brim cast his eyes in shadow, but Samuel could feel them, sharp, taunting like rattlesnake eyes before a strike. It had been near 10 years since they'd shared a fire. 10 years since the cattle drives that bound them as partners, and 10 years since Elias sold him out to land barons whose hired guns ambushed them in the canyon. Samuel's wife, Helen, had taken a bullet meant for him that day. She bled out in his arms, her hand gripping his badge, whispering for him to never let go of his honor. Elias had vanished, leaving Samuel to bury her alone. Now here he was, as though the years between hadn't passed. Like the ghost that had been haunting Samuel's every waking thought finally found its flesh. "Storm hasn't aged you much," Elias drawled, voice smooth with mockery. "Still stiff as a fence post, still clinging to scraps that don't belong to you." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Why ride back here, Vance? To gloat? To finish what you started?" Elias chuckled low, and from his coat pulled a folded paper, crisp despite the rain. He laid it on the table like a gambler placing down an unbeatable card. Samuel didn't need to look close. Even from across the firelight he could see the seal, the signatures. "A deed. Your land," Elias said, tapping it with a gloved finger. "All legal. Sheriff will back it. Town'll back it. Either you sign this copy to make it neat, or by sunrise, Dyer, I'll hold it anyway. Ranch Creek, even that patch of earth where your wife's bones rest." Samuel's grip on the shotgun whitened his knuckles. He spat into the flames. "I buried too much here to hand it over to a snake." Elias only grinned wider, teeth flashing. "Always so noble. Always clutching your little tokens." His eyes flicked toward Samuel's chest, where under the shirt pocket rested the folded note he'd received only minutes before. Samuel felt the words burn against him even now. "Don't take it off. Just do it." He wondered if Elias knew about it, if he was the one who sent it, playing at some cruel joke. Samuel stepped forward, voice low and steady. "You betrayed me once. Cost me her life. I won't sign a damn thing." For a long beat the cabin was silent, but for the fire and the storm pressing against the windows. Then Elias rose, slow, deliberate. He tipped his hat back, his eyes catching the firelight at last, cold, hungry eyes that had never known regret. "You think this is a choice, Sam?" His voice was a whisper, venom coiled tight. He leaned close enough Samuel could smell the wet leather and whiskey on his breath. "Then we'll peel it off you." Piece by piece, Samuel's heart pounded. He didn't know if Elias meant his land, his honor, or his very flesh. But the promise hung there, sharp as steel, as Elias's shadow stretched across the cabin like a noose tightening. The dawn broke not with birdsong, but with smoke. Samuel Dyer smelled it before he saw it, a bitter stench carried on the chill morning air. He ran from the porch barefoot, shotgun in hand, heart hammering as the orange glow lit the horizon where his barn stood. Flames leapt into the sky, black smoke curling upward like the devil's own flag. Horses screamed inside, thrashing against their stalls, panicked eyes flashing in the firelight. Ranch hands were already there, shouting, forming a desperate line with buckets from the well. But water hissed uselessly against the roaring blaze. Samuel fired a round into the air, the crack splitting the morning like a whip. Across the fields, riders were already pulling away. Elias's men, he knew it in his gut. Their laughter carried faintly over the crackle of fire, cruel and mocking. One of them raised his hat in salute before vanishing into the hills. "Get the stock out!" Samuel bellowed. "Cut the ropes, drive 'em through the east gate." His voice was hoarse, smoke tearing at his lungs. The ranch hands struggled, some dragging half-burned doors off hinges, others breaking open pens with axes. Horses bolted, wild-eyed, some stumbling, some kicking loose into the pasture. Samuel ran straight into the choking heat, his sleeve across his mouth, forcing his way toward the last stall. A mare kicked wildly at the boards, her mane on fire. Samuel smashed the lock with the butt of his shotgun and slapped her flank. She tore past him, nearly knocking him flat, vanishing into the haze. By the time the roof sagged and crashed inward, there was nothing left to save. The men fell back, coughing, eyes streaming. Samuel stood in the smoke, chest heaving, face blackened. His barn gone. Feed, tools, tack, years of work, burned down in a single morning. Hoofbeats approached on the road. For a brief moment, Samuel thought Elias had returned to finish the job. But no, it was Sheriff Harper, sitting tall in the saddle, flanked by 2 deputies. The sheriff rode slow, his mustache neat, his coat buttoned, not a trace of urgency in him. He swung down with a faint grunt, surveying the ruin as though it were no more troubling than a toppled fence. "Shame," Harper muttered. His eyes moved from the smouldering barn to Samuel's face. "Can't prove it's Vance, though, can you?" Samuel's grip on the shotgun tightened. Who else rides out at dawn to burn a man's home? The sheriff shrugged, adjusting his hat. "A lot of men got grudges in this county. Fires happen. Best thing you can do now is sell what's left before you lose more." His gaze lingered too long, and Samuel saw it then. The quick flick of Harper's eyes toward the horizon, the faint curl of a smirk he tried to hide. Elias had the sheriff in his pocket, same as the judges, the bankers, half the town council. Samuel could almost see the deed already being passed back and forth behind closed doors. His land was being stolen with fire and ink, not bullets alone. Samuel's hand brushed against the note in his pocket, still folded, the ink burned into his memory. "Don't take it off, just do it." He heard the words like a voice whispering in the smoke. Was it his badge the note spoke of, the symbol he had laid aside years ago? Was it his wedding ring, the last tether to Helen? Or was it his own restraint, the line between holding his fire and taking a life? Harper stepped closer, his boots crunching on ash. His voice dropped low so the ranch hands couldn't hear. "By tonight," he said, calm as a man ordering supper, "you won't own a fence post." Samuel stared at him through the rising smoke, the fire still crackling behind him. He didn't answer. But deep inside, something had already shifted. The chapel sat half sunken into the earth, its steeple leaning, its windows clouded with dust and age. Samuel Dyer pushed the creaking door open, and the smell of damp wood and old wax washed over him. This place had not heard prayer in years, yet he came often enough, drawn by the silence, by the stone that marked his wife's resting place behind the chapel walls. The storm had passed, leaving the sky iron grey, and the fields around him smouldered where the barn had burned. His boots echoed against the hollow floorboards as he walked down the aisle, hat in hand, shoulders heavy with more than smoke. He stopped at the altar where a small wooden cross still stood crooked. Behind it, through a side door, lay the graveyard. He knelt, pulling the folded note from his pocket. The words seemed to mock him in the cold light that filtered through broken glass. "Don't take it off, just do it." They pressed against him like a hand at his throat. "You still wear your guilt like a noose," the voice startled him. Samuel turned sharply, his hand brushing the butt of his revolver. From the shadows by the back pew stepped Clara Ferrer, wrapped in a dark shawl, her hair streaked with silver though her eyes burned clear. She was no ghost, though for a moment Samuel thought he was seeing one. He remembered her from years before, the woman who had sat at Helen's side when the blood would not stop, when Samuel's shaking hands had failed. She had been a healer, moving from camp to camp, living on charity and stubborn will. "Clara," Samuel whispered. She stepped closer, her boots careful on the warped boards. "I knew I'd find you here. You never left her behind, not really." She touched his shoulder, her hand steady, her eyes soft with pity. "You blame yourself. But guilt don't bring back the dead. It only buries the living alongside them." Samuel looked back at the note in his hand. "You know about this?" Her lips pressed thin. "I heard whispers. A warning passed through the valley. Some debts ain't paid in ink, Samuel. They're paid in choice. And yours is at the door." He rose slowly, folding the note tight. His voice came rough. "If I kill him, Clara, if I spill his blood, I'm no better than the man who took her from me." Her gaze sharpened, cutting through the damp silence. "And if you don't? How many barns will burn? How many graves will you stand over before you see that doing nothing is worse than drawing iron? You want to keep your honor wrapped around you like a badge? Fine. But honor without action is just cowardice dressed up pretty." The words hit him like a lash. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a sharp crack split the air. A bullet punched through the chapel window, showering him and Clara with shards of glass. The old cross tipped and fell, clattering against the floorboards. Samuel threw himself against the pews, dragging Clara down with him as splinters rained. From outside came the thunder of hooves, the harsh laughter of men who had no fear of desecrating sacred ground. Elias's riders had found him, even here. The chapel walls shook as lead tore through them, splinters raining down like hail. Samuel Dyer pressed Clara low against the pews, his own revolver barking in reply. The air filled with dust, smoke, and the bitter tang of gunpowder. Riders circled outside. Their laughter carried through the shattered glass, boots pounding against the earth as they swung back for another pass. Samuel rose just enough to sight one through the broken window. He squeezed off a shot, and the man toppled from the saddle with a cry, hitting the dirt hard. The others roared in anger, bullets slamming into the chapel walls. Clara hissed as a shard of glass tore across her arm, leaving blood streaking down her sleeve. She clutched at the wound, breath ragged. "Leave me!" she shouted through clenched teeth. "Go, Samuel. They want you, not me." He ignored her, hauling her up by the good arm. "I've buried one woman already. I'll not bury another." He dragged her toward the back, shoving the warped door open with his shoulder. Smoke rolled out into the pale morning as they stumbled into the graveyard beyond. Horses whinnied nearby where the outlaws had tethered them. Samuel didn't hesitate. He cut one free with his knife, lifted Clara into the saddle despite her protests, and swung up behind her. Shots chased them as they thundered away, hooves pounding against the hardpan. Dust rose behind them in choking clouds. Samuel leaned low over Clara, urging the horse faster, each heartbeat hammering in his ears like a drum of war. The open plain stretched ahead until it broke at a weathered signpost where 3 roads met. The crossroads. There, waiting as if he had planned it all along, sat Elias Vance. A dozen riders flanked him, their faces shadowed beneath wide brims, rifles glinting in the new sun. Elias himself sat calm, his gloved hands resting on the horn of his saddle, his smirk cutting across the distance like a blade. Samuel pulled up short, the horse trembling beneath him. Clara swayed, gripping the saddle horn, blood soaking her sleeve. Elias tipped his hat as though greeting an old friend at supper. "All roads lead back to me, Sam," Elias called, voice smooth and steady. "Didn't matter where you ran. This was always where it ended." Samuel's hand brushed against his chest, against the cool metal badge pinned beneath his shirt. His father's badge. The last relic of honor he had clung to when everything else was taken. Elias raised a finger, pointing straight at Samuel. "Take it off. Strip it now before these men. Show 'em you've got nothing left but dirt. Do that, maybe I let you crawl away with your skin." The words in the folded note burned hot in Samuel's mind. Don't take it off. Just do it. Now he understood. It was no warning to surrender. It was a command to hold fast. Samuel sat tall in the saddle, one hand steady on the reins, the other tightening on the revolver's grip. His voice was iron. "I'll not tear it off for the likes of you. This badge don't come loose, not while I'm breathing." Elias's grin widened. "Then I'll peel it from your chest myself." He snapped his fingers, and rifles raised as the riders closed in. Samuel's thumb eased back the hammer. His heart steadied. He was ready. Then from the ridge above, a rifle cracked. The shot rang out sharp and true, and one of Elias's men pitched sideways from his horse, blood spraying the dust. The riders reined back in shock, eyes darting toward the hills. Someone else had entered the fight. The shot echoed across the valley, scattering crows from the ridge. Dust settled around the fallen rider, while the rest of Elias's men jerked their reins, confusion flashing in their eyes. Samuel wheeled his horse toward the rise, searching the rocks. Then he saw her, a slim figure crouched among the boulders, rifle braced steady, black shawl whipped by the wind. She rose from cover and called out, her voice cutting clear across the open ground. "Vance!" Elias turned, his smirk faltering for the first time. "Maribel Cortez," Samuel muttered under his breath. He hadn't seen her in years, not since her ranch went up in flames, her husband gunned down when he stood against Elias's men. The widow, every townsperson whispered about but never helped. She walked down the slope like she had no fear of a dozen rifles trained on her. In her left hand she carried a worn, leather-bound ledger, its spine cracked, pages stuffed with scraps of notes. In her right she kept the rifle leveled at Elias. Her dark eyes burned with the kind of fury that came only from a life already broken. "You ruined my family," she shouted. "Burned my fields, left my children starving. You thought no one kept track. She lifted the ledger high so all could see. "I've written it all. Every bribe, every killing, every name bought and sold by your gold." Elias spat into the dirt, forcing a laugh, though it came thin. "That book's worth nothing but firewood. Not when the town reads it," Maribel said. "Now they'll know." Samuel's chest tightened as he watched her. The note in his pocket blazed like a brand. "Don't take it off, just do it." It wasn't his wife's hand, nor some trick of fate. It had been Maribel who sent it. A message meant for the only man stubborn enough to face Elias in the open. Proof. Choice. The moment had arrived. Clara swayed in the saddle beside him, her sleeve soaked through with blood, her face pale. She gripped his arm. "Samuel, listen to me. That ledger will never see daylight. Harper won't allow it. You carry it into town, and you'll be walking straight into the gallows." Her warning coiled tight around his ribs, but Samuel kept his eyes on Maribel. "Maybe," he said. "But maybe it's the only rope worth walking under." Elias snapped his fingers. His riders began to circle, uneasy but obedient. Samuel raised his revolver, steady now, fire in his eyes. Maribel cocked her rifle, daring any of them to come closer. The crossroads became a powder keg, silence stretching so thin it seemed the sky itself might shatter. Then the crunch of new boots broke it. From the eastern road, riders emerged in neat formation. Rifles gleamed in the sun. At their head rode Sheriff Harper, his badge polished bright, his smile cold as river ice. "Well, well," Harper drawled, sliding from his saddle with a grace that made his deputies fan out behind him. "Ledger's mine." His gaze swept from Samuel to Maribel, then lingered on Clara's bleeding arm with mocking pity. "Hand it over, or you'll both swing before sundown." The rifles leveled as one. Dust rose around them, choking. The ledger trembled in Maribel's hand, its secrets heavy enough to topple the valley. Samuel's finger brushed the trigger, his heartbeat slow, steady. The trap had snapped shut, and he knew the noose was tightening. The sun beat down hard on the town square, bleaching the dust pale and making the air shimmer. Samuel Dyer felt the barrel of a deputy's rifle jabbed into his spine as he was shoved forward. Clara limping beside him, her arm bound in blood-stained cloth, and Maribel Cortez clutching the ledger like it was her last breath. Sheriff Harper strutted ahead with Elias Vance at his side, their boots striking the boards with the rhythm of men who believed the town already belonged to them. By the time they reached the center, townsfolk had begun to gather. Men stepped out from storefronts. Women shaded their eyes with aprons. Children perched on hitching posts. Curiosity pulled them in like a tide. They whispered Samuel's name, hissed Maribel's, but when their eyes fell on Harper's gleaming badge, most fell silent. Harper turned and spread his arms as if addressing a congregation. "Folks," he called, his voice smooth as oil, "what you see here is justice. This man," he gestured at Samuel, "was caught trespassing, resisting lawful transfer of land. This woman," he sneered at Maribel, "carries false testimony. And this one," his eyes slid toward Clara with mock pity, "this one's guilty of nothing but bad company." Elias stepped forward, unfolding a paper with dramatic flair. The ink was still crisp, the signatures bold, though Samuel knew one of them was a lie forged by Elias's own hand. "Here it is," Elias announced, holding it high. "Deed signed. Samuel Dyer ceded his land. I own the ranch, the creek, the very dirt under his boots." He turned to the crowd with a smile that dripped arrogance. "By law, it's mine." The murmur of the crowd deepened, unease rippling like wind through dry grass. Samuel's chest burned, his hands tied behind him, but his voice broke free like thunder. "If you're honest men, let the town see the proof." He nodded at Maribel, who in one fierce motion lifted the ledger and hurled it onto the ground before them. The leather burst open, pages fluttering, covered in tight script. Names, dates, bribes, killings, every scar Elias and Harper had left on the valley laid bare in ink. Gasps cut the air. Men stepped closer, squinting at the names. One woman pressed her hand to her mouth. Another whispered, "That's my brother's mark." A rancher muttered about his burned fields. The ledger spread like wildfire, sparking recognition in every set of eyes. "Lies," Harper barked, voice rising above the stir. He kicked at the ledger, scattering pages. Lies cooked up by bitter folk who lost what they couldn't hold. His deputies shifted uneasily, watching the townsfolk whisper, their rifles wavering just enough to betray doubt. Clara stepped forward, pale but unbroken, and lifted her bandaged arm high. "Look at us," she cried, voice trembling with fury. "We bled under their greed. Our homes burned, our kin vanished, our children starved while they filled their pockets. How much more will you take before you call it what it is?" Her voice rang across the square, cutting sharper than gunfire. The crowd erupted into low voices, suspicion turning to anger. A man shouted, "My barn!" Another cried, "My son!" Hands clenched fists, and some reached instinctively for tools at their belts. The tide was shifting, the silence cracking open into something Harper could no longer smother. Elias hissed at Harper under his breath, his eyes darting nervously around the square. Harper's jaw tightened, sweat shining on his brow. He drew his pistol, fast as a striking snake, and leveled it straight at Maribel Cortez's head. The town gasped in unison. Samuel lunged forward, only to be wrenched back by a deputy. Harper's voice came low and venomous. "Ledger's done. And so is she." The hammer clicked back. Dust swirled in the heat. Every heartbeat stretched into silence as the square froze on the edge of blood. The square held its breath, the sun a burning coin overhead, the dust hanging thick as if even the air feared to move. Sheriff Harper's pistol hovered inches from Maribel Cortez's brow, the hammer cocked back, his finger steady on the trigger. Samuel felt the world slow, every sound sharpening, the creak of a wagon wheel, the cry of a crow overhead, Clara's ragged breathing beside him. And then it broke. Samuel lunged with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. His shoulder slammed into Harper, the pistol jerking skyward as it fired. The shot tore through the bell rope on the church across the square, sending the bell tolling like judgment itself. Harper cursed, grappling, but Samuel wrenched the gun from his hand, the iron scorching hot. The sheriff's deputies faltered, caught between firing into the crowd and facing their own neighbors now pressing forward. Angry and unafraid, Elias Vance's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a whip. "Kill him!" His revolver flashed as he drew, his eyes wild, the smirk gone, replaced by a snarl of pure hatred. The street erupted in gunfire. Men and women scattered, diving behind barrels and wagons, screams mingling with the roar of shots. Dust geysered up as bullets tore through the ground. Horses reared, screaming, hooves striking sparks from the stone. Samuel dropped Harper's pistol and drew his own, answering fire with fire. Elias's first shot grazed his side, hot blood soaking his shirt, but Samuel stood firm, returning fire with the steadiness of a man carved from stone. The two locked eyes across the square, every soul present watching as the feud of a decade came to its violent climax. Elias charged forward, firing wild, rage distorting his face. Samuel sidestepped, his boots sliding in the dirt, his own shot cutting Elias's hat clean off. The outlaw roared, barreling through the chaos, determined to put Samuel into the ground, no matter the cost. The two collided, fists flying, guns clattering to the dirt. They crashed into a trough, water exploding around them, then staggered back to their feet, mud and blood mixing on their faces. Elias drew a hidden knife, slashing across Samuel's arm. Samuel grunted, pain burning through him, but he didn't falter. He grabbed Elias by the collar, slammed him into the wall of the saloon, the boards shuddering with the force. The crowd surged around, a storm of voices shouting, some begging for it to end, others screaming for blood. Pinned against the wall, Elias spat blood and hissed through broken teeth. "You should have taken it off, Dyer. Would have spared you this." His eyes flicked to Samuel's chest where the badge gleamed. Battered but unbroken, Samuel's voice was low, steady, filled with all the years of grief and rage. "I don't strip my honor for snakes." His revolver was back in his hand, cold steel pressed to Elias's chest. The square went silent, as if the earth itself leaned in to listen. Then one final shot cracked, louder than the rest, echoing through every board and brick of the town. Elias Vance jerked once, eyes wide, then slumped lifeless to the ground, dust rising around his fallen body. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the crowd erupted, voices rising in fury. Not at Samuel, but at Harper, who tried to back away, hands raised. "It wasn't me," he stammered, desperation cracking his polished mask. "I did what I had to. Orders." The townsfolk surged forward, grabbing him by the arms, dragging him down. They spat on his badge, cursed his name, their grief and anger boiling over after years of silence. Harper screamed, twisting, but the people had turned. He was hauled away, his polished boots digging furrows in the dust. His cries drowned in the roar of the crowd. Samuel stood in the center of it all, his shirt torn, blood dripping from his side, revolver heavy in his hand. His chest heaved, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes still burned with the fire of a man who had refused to bow. Around him, the town seemed to breathe for the first time in years, chains breaking with every shout. Then the noise dimmed. Clara knelt beside him, her bandaged arm trembling as she reached for his hand. Her eyes searched his, soft with both sorrow and pride. "You did it," she whispered. "But what's left of you now?" Her question hung in the hot, dust-choked air, heavier than the smoke of gunpowder, heavier than the years that had brought them here. Samuel looked down at the badge still pinned to his chest, blood-stained but unbroken, and felt the weight of her words settle on his soul. The valley smelled of ash and new earth. Weeks had passed since the gunfire in the square, yet echoes of that day still clung to the town like smoke after a fire. The ranch stood scarred but not silent. Men raised beams for a new barn, their shirts stained with sweat and dust, their voices carrying in the wind as hammers struck wood. The land bore its wounds, blackened patches where flames had devoured fences, but green shoots pushed stubbornly through the scorched soil. Hope, fragile but certain, had taken root. Clara moved among the wounded, her hands steady even when her body still ached. She changed bandages, pressed cool cloths to fevered brows, and whispered comfort to men who had fought and bled to see their homes freed of the yoke Elias and Harper had laid upon them. Sometimes, when she thought no one saw, she leaned against the chapel wall, her bandaged arm trembling from the weight of it all. But when Samuel caught her eye, she straightened, her gaze fierce again, unwilling to let grief own her. Maribel Cortez had mounted her horse at dawn and ridden out across the open range. The ledger she carried was locked away in the town hall now, guarded by the very people who once turned their heads from truth. Her children followed her wagon, and the whispers that once clung to her name had turned to respect. The widow had become something else, a symbol, a voice the valley would not forget. The townsfolk planted new fields together, neighbors who had once stood apart, now bound by what they endured. Broken walls were mended, new seeds pressed into the ground. There was laughter again, faint at first, then louder, as if the earth itself wanted to shake off the years of silence. Samuel moved through it all like a man caught between two worlds. His body bore the scars, the stitched cut on his arm, the ache in his side when he rose too fast. But it was the weight on his chest he felt most. The badge. He wore it not for office, not for law. He wore it for the promise he had made at Helen's grave, for the note that had commanded him in the dark. Don't take it off. Just do it. It had ceased to be a riddle. It was now his truth. One evening, as the sun bled red over the ridge and shadows stretched long across the valley, Samuel stood at her grave again. The earth was settled, the grass grown soft over it, the small wooden cross weathered by rain. He rested a hand against the stone, hat in his other hand, and spoke low, words only the wind could carry. "I kept it on," he said, voice rough, "and I acted, not just for me, for all of them." He closed his eyes, remembering her hand gripping his badge that last night, her whisper in his ear to never let go of honor. He breathed deep, letting the silence answer back. The horse waited at the fence, saddled and restless. Samuel slid the note from his pocket one last time. The ink faded, but the words still sharp. He folded it slow, tucked it into the inside of his coat, then swung into the saddle. Clara watched from the porch, her eyes following him, though she said nothing. Maribel's children chased each other down the lane, laughter echoing. The town's hammer strokes and voices carried in the twilight. Samuel turned the horse toward the horizon. The sun sank lower, painting the land blood-red, then gold, then fading into a quiet, endless dark. He rode steady, upright in the saddle, not broken but tempered. A man who had stood his ground when the world demanded he strip away the last piece of himself. In the Wild West, a man's worth wasn't measured by what he took off, but by what he never let go.